really anything you'd like to talk about. Maybe perhaps in this particular instance, focusing on maybe how to combine faith with politics. And also I'd be interested in your view on, because they always say politics and religion don't mix. Yeah, I personally think it mixes quite well.
Yeah. So what do I think about that?
Yeah.
So I think, politics is about people, isn't it? And it's about how we do life together. And so I don't think you can separate faith and politics. I think there are dangers when you become partisan. And so I think we've seen that in different areas of global politics where Christians are aligned themselves too strongly. But what I love, I guess, about the New Testament is you have Romans 13, where Paul says, pray for those in authority, obey the governing authorities, those kind of things. So, and he was in a place where the governing authorities were not very sympathetic towards Christian faith, but he said, honour them and obey them. But then you also get the Revelation 13 bit where John has been exiled and there's been great persecution against Christians, and he describes the governing authorities actually as a beast coming out of the sea, which is a much more negative perspective of that. And I think there's a tension in there that we're called to obey governing authorities, we're called to pray for them, but we're also called sometimes to challenge governing authorities. And so my thing, I think if any Christian totally aligns with any one political party or on every single issue, I would want to probably ask questions of how is it the political party that is shaping their worldview, or is it the scriptures? Because I think that there will always be elements that will hit up against where we're at.
I mean, that is really interesting, because why do you think people say don't mix the two? Because it seems very, whenever I meet people, especially of the cloth, there's always an inclination to want to talk about politics, and I'm always incredibly happy to speak about politics. We mentioned there's some hustings going on that unfortunately I can't make. And obviously there's a political, and I think one of the reasons why the church is so keen on doing those hustings is because it's around a democratic society. But also, is there a stronger link, do you think, from a faith point of view, or is it just curiosity? I mean, what do you think the reason is?
I think hopefully Christians are concerned about the place where they live.
Yeah.
I think Christians are often hopefully, well, I think statistically Christians are often people that volunteer in all sorts of areas. So they volunteer in the life of the church, but they will also volunteer often in their local communities. They might run football clubs, they might run chatty crafter groups, they might run all sorts of different toddler groups and all sorts of things. So Christians will often care about the place that they're in. In the book of Jeremiah it says to pray for the peace and prosperity of the city. And so I think there is an inbuilt tradition there where Christians will care about that. And of course, once you get beyond some of the micro issues, actually politics is going to be part of that. And so, I think Christians will often be maybe not partisan politically involved, but they will care about the place they're in.
And it's quite, I mean, not for now, but it's quite interesting because one of the great privileges I've had when I was AMP is seeing different religions as well and seeing different faiths.
Yeah.
And actually, politics has always played quite an important part in that. But do you think there's an inclination, dependent on where your faith base is, to have a view of politics? And what I mean by that is do you think there's an inclination for somebody to be more socialist from a religious point of view, or do you think it doesn't have any indication? It's probably a very difficult question. Actually.
No, I think it probably shifts over time.
Okay.
So again, my political history and church history is not amazing, but I think you do see shifts. So there are, you think of Methodists and socialism, in the early 20th century, that very much went together. That was a driving force. If you think about, globally, Universal Declaration of Human Rights actually grew out of social, Catholic social teaching in many ways. So there are ways in which it will. So I think people will lean one way or the other. And I think often there are elements of perhaps conservative politics where the idea of personal responsibility very much flows from a scriptural tradition, and there are ways in which we would want to think about that. So I often see some Christians will go left wing, some Christians will go right wing, and I think there's biblical support for both. But it always worries me if somebody totally aligns, because I would want to challenge conservatives in particular ways, and I want to challenge people who might support Labour or be more left wing in particular ways.
So that's a really good point. I think it's really important. For me, it's about our actions. But talking about challenging, ask me a couple of questions then about my maybe my values.
So we've spoken before, Amanda, about you know, that you're a churchgoer, you're a Christian. Do you find there's a tension there between being a practicing Christian and being somebody involved deeply in the political world?
I don't think I do. As you know, my vicar, I go to one particular church. Although you know, I have to go to different faith groups, different places, and they're always very good. When I go along to church, I'm going for my reasons. I'm going for my faith. I'm going for peace. I'm going to just sort of collect myself because it's really important. And I suppose faith can be different things to different people. One of the things I have done historically, there's been some really difficult free votes, and you will know that there are free votes that you have where there could be a indication. I'd be interested in your views as well. But those in particular where, for example, abortion, that's always been a free vote, but obviously has deep religious roots. There was gay marriage as an example as well, and also euthanasia in terms of from an illness point of view. So it's that's where there can sometimes be not a conflict, but where it's really helpful to seek that religious that support. Although there may be it may be slightly more complicated, I guess.
And what about the culture of politics? Because of course one of the things we've seen globally, but particularly in the West, is a real kind of divide really between left wing and right wing. And politics can often be seen as being quite dirty, really. And of course, how do you find that? How do you find sitting in that culture as a Christian?
Well, I guess I always try. It's a really good question, and you will face similar challenges, I guess, with your congregation. And I always try and act by my faith, which is that I try and be decent. I try and act with integrity, hard work. So, and hopefully that comes across in the community. You know, I have a great passion for things like mental health, supporting people with mental health issues, but also proactively getting stuck in. And you've been talking about the things you have here, like the toddler groups, and I did Brownies for 20 years, school governor for 20 years. It's just really important for me to be part of that community because what I really want to do, and I guess it does align to my faith as well, is thinking about how we support others, especially those who perhaps don't have the advantages that we have.
And so if I could, I suppose another question would be, how does the person of Jesus shape your approach to politics?
Oh gosh, that's a really...
It's a vicar question.
It is a vicar question. That's a really good vicar question. I guess for me, and this might not be a very good answer, but it's an honest answer, it's the peace I get in the faith I have that really shapes things. So sometimes you don't know where to go. Sometimes you can be really conflicted. But if you allow yourself peace, which is something I think you can get through faith, then it really will help you to go forward. Because sometimes, and it will help you make those difficult decisions. Not a very good answer, I'm afraid, but it's probably...
No, I'd love to talk more about that at some point. But no, I think you've got to be honest, haven't you?
Yeah.
How that engages you.
Yeah. What about yourself? How did you come to faith?
How did I come to faith? So I grew up going to church. My mum's a committed Christian lady. My dad goes to church sometimes, and not others, but say he's Christian. He moved to the United States when I was about 9 years old, and so my mum effectively brought me and my brother and sister up. And I think for a long time, faith is something you kind of inherit, to a certain age, and then there comes a point when you have to go, is this, sometimes it's similar to politics. Sometimes your parents vote a particular thing, and you have to go, am I going to do that as well? And for me, when I was age 16, over a period of about 6 months, I would say I went from knowing about Jesus to knowing Jesus. So it was head knowledge. I'd kind of grown up stories, colouring things in Sunday school, hearing things. But over a period of about 6 months, it went from knowing about Jesus to, oh my goodness, he exists, he died for me, he loves me, he rose from the dead, and he's actually at work in the world today. And so if I had to pick on a few things in that 6 months, my godfather was an aid worker in Ethiopia. And he, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was I can't remember the exact dates, but he was killed in a plane hijacking.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I don't know if you remember that. And not everybody was killed in that plane hijacking. Some people survived, and I went to his memorial service, and I didn't know him very well because he was he was in Africa most of the time. But I went to the memorial service as a 16-year-old guy, and his wife was there, his kids were there, and it wasn't that it was unreal, but in the midst of tragedy, there was real hope in the resurrection. And I was like, oh my goodness. And we heard stories of a very quiet, gentle man who'd lived his faith out. When the plane was being hijacked, he asked if he could pray for people. He went around praying for people. He said, look, if you don't know Jesus, it would be a really good time to come to know him. And he lived that out even to the very end. And as a 16-year-old, in the midst of those 6 months, there were other things as well, but it was like, oh, this is really real. And so that, and very quickly for me, that went from, kind of our youth group exploded in a wonderful way. We began to see people coming to faith from outside church and all those things. So that's the quick version.
I mean, that's. I mean, we need longer than like 20 minutes to talk about this, because I could just talk about it for so long. It's quite interesting, because I'm almost from a not a different way, but like youth groups. So I had quite a chaotic childhood. So my mum was an alcoholic, addicted to prescription drugs, and I didn't feel a lot of anger. That's not true, but there was quite a lot of sadness, I guess. And what I used to do is, one of the things I remember vividly is I've always was brought up in church and then say prayers every night. And even now, if I just close my eyes, I automatically go say Father, Lord's Prayer, and then I'll go, God bless Mum, God bless Dad, God. Literally, even though my mum's been dead for many years, because it became a routine, but also a sort of a something to. A strength, a sort of pillar of strength. But I do remember, and I think this is where, for me, my faith is the strongest, is when I would feel hurt the most, when my mum would do something that was really hateful. I can remember going and sitting, I don't know if it's about the physical thing or the peace, but sitting at the edge of my bed and just praying and just thinking, why is this fair? How can this be fair? And then the peace that comes over you, that was able to come over me, then enabled me to get up and go back. And sometimes even, and I remember Mum once, she'd been really, really horrible. And I think it was my first salary or something, and I'd been out and I bought a ring, and it was just an underthing, it was my first thing. And she said, I really want that. And I was thinking, no, I've earned this is mine. And I just remember going upstairs, and she was so vile. And I just sat down and I thought, and I just prayed, and I thought, you know what? This ring means nothing to me, but it would be so powerful to give her. And I gave her the ring. Stupid things to remember, but that's where I think faith can be really helpful.
It's fascinating, isn't it? That kind of the tangible personal experience of God in a way. You can have the intellectual academic discussions, which I think are important, but so often when you talk to people, it's not that. Like, we don't throw our brains out, but there's something about as you experience the presence of God and the peace that you talk about.
Yes, and there's one prayer, thankfully, that was never answered, and I remember doing this, is just praying that I would die before the age of 20, which is a horrible thing to have to go through, but it was never a wish to die, it was just I didn't want to live, which is slightly different. I never had a desire to end it all, but I just thought the world was cruel, I thought the world was harsh, and it can be, and it felt particularly harsh and particularly cruel at that time. And so I'd go at night, say my normal prayers, and just pray that I would never have children and that I wouldn't live past the age of 20. Wow. And thankfully, I'm here at a great old age, and I've got the two most amazing children and a granddaughter as well. So sometimes, and I guess my message on that would be, sometimes, so I don't know what the message would be on that actually, got no idea, but luckily I do find myself still here.
Maybe in the darkest times that there is light at the end of the tunnel, there can be hope. And is that why for you mental health has been such an important thing to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it can be. Funnily enough, it maybe doesn't sound like this is the case from what I've just said, but I've never really suffered with mental health issues, as in terms of how I've seen other people suffer. So, my nan was agoraphobic, claustrophobic, was on Valium and everything. Like I said, my mum had addiction problems. My cousin, very sadly, he took his life when he was 36. But so I've never had, never been depressed, I don't think. That might sound a contradiction.
It's
because
interesting that tension between what's
But it was. I was going through life and never wanted it. It just didn't want to live. It's hard to quite describe. But I think it has given me hopefully an understanding. And one of the things as well I think it has done is allow me compassion to other people. And so I remember when I was maybe 18 or 19, someone tried to take their life at work, and the person they instantly called to talk to that person was me.
Wow.
And I don't know why. I think it was helpful. I don't know. I did become a volunteer at Samaritans as well when I was 19. So I think it's given me that compassion. That actually, I wish I'd learned this. I really wish Andy had learned this sooner. I wish I'd learned that my mum, how amazing she was, because it's only when she died, and I reflect back, this person had all these mental health issues, was actually a brilliant person that I never ever got to know. That is sad, and that's what I don't ever want to happen to people. I want really, if people have mental health issues, I would love us to acknowledge it, which I hope we do now, and talk more about it, and we can reach in and love those people, not be hurt by their actions. And I was hurt by my mum's actions, and I shouldn't have been, because she was poorly. And I do regret that. Yeah,
that's interesting. I think it's one. Obviously, society has become more aware of those, of those issues around mental health. And interesting, the church too is beginning. I think it was late to the game. I think often we have put it down to weak faith or fragility, and I think there's a greater awareness that actually, you can be a faithful follower of Jesus and still really struggle in all kinds of ways. And actually, as church, we need to love people better and support people and care for people, and actually, recognise people need, medical help. They need psychological help. They need counselling alongside the prayer and support that the church can.
Let me ask you a question, because both you and I clearly have faith. We know how it's helped us. How do we get more people to have faith without them thinking it's only for people who are needy or not there? Because I would love the church to have so many more people to get what we get.
Yeah, so I'm at St Francis in Mackworth, and we've been here for 4 years. And we've chatted before that when we arrived, there was 12 to 20 people in the congregation, faithful people, keeping the church going, committed to worshipping and praying. And we brought 30 to 40 with us from St Werburgh's in the city centre. And what we've seen is church grow. So I was just sharing with you, we had two regular services 2 Sundays ago, 150 people, and that's across every age, from babies that are 3 months old up to people in their 80s and everything in between. And what we've seen in Mackworth is people encountering a church that meets them where they're at. So we go hard on social media, we give out things at Easter, we send Christmas cards all the way around the estate, basically letting people know that you might not get all this stuff, you might not believe all this stuff, you may have loads of questions, but we want you to come and encounter something here, and we want you to ask those, we want to be honest. And we find that often people say, but I don't believe in God. And when you drill down, actually the God they don't believe in is the one that I don't believe in either. They don't recognise Jesus as who he is, they don't recognise the God of the scriptures, the one who loves us and cares for us and wants to meet us where we're at. And so, I think people have lots of questions around church and faith. I think often people, the questions that I get asked on social media are, can I bring kids? What do I have to wear? What's going to happen? What if I don't know about the Bible? What if I don't know how to pray? And I think often church almost start up here. They expect people to know all sorts of things, and we have to say, no, there's no such thing as a silly question. You can ask whatever you like. We need to be really honest. There's parking outside. You can wear trainers. You can wear jeans. It doesn't matter. You don't have to know everything. The Bible has 66 books. It's not just one book. There's chapters of the big numbers, verses of the little numbers. The bit before Jesus' life on earth is the Old Testament. The bit Jesus' life and afterwards is the New Testament. Don't assume people are silly. Don't patronise them, but actually assume intelligence, but not background knowledge. And I think if you meet them there, that can,
You've said something so important, because I have stood outside churches and not gone in.
Yeah.
And I think, and asked myself all of those questions as well. And it is even as simple as, what do I wear? Am I wearing the right things? Yeah. And and I think the hardest thing is getting people through that door. Yeah. If you had a message to say to people, not it could be St Francis, it could be
lots of good churches in Derby.
There are lots of good churches in Derby. How can we reach out to people and say, actually, come and join us.
I mean, at the most base level, it's come and check us out. Like, you know, we don't lock the doors. You can leave whenever you like, but, you know, come along, have a look online, see what people are doing, reach out to them online, reach out to them, you know, by email, give them a phone call, because every church will want to see new people. Now, some places are, I think, better at connecting with people who are brand new, because some places actually just are not used to people turning up, so they don't quite know what to do. But I think also for churches, we need to put people on the gates, we need to put people on the doors, we need to have people smile. You know, we have people literally down on the gates by the road. We often put people who've only been with us for a few weeks on the doors, because they know what it's like to walk in scared. They know what it's like to be anxious as you walk in. But I think also, you know, engaging with your community. So litter picking, giving out sweets, sending cards, you know, doing beer and carols in the pub, you know, hosting a football tournament, having a fun day, like whatever it is. It's not just getting people into us, but it's also meeting people where they're at. Because those, I think there was a stat years ago. People have to be invited to church 7 times before they come along, and so the first time they think, oh, I've not thought about that. The second time they think, oh, yeah. And if, you know, often people say, oh, Andy, I'm going to come along. Well, if I had £1 for every time somebody told me they're going to church, I'd be a very, very rich person. It's a long way even from saying they're going to come to actually getting there. So Amanda, last summertime, I started bouldering, like climbing over in Chaddeston. I'd wanted to go bouldering for years, but I didn't know what you had to do. I didn't know what you had to wear. I didn't know what the people, and that's a very non-spiritual thing, but I was nervous about doing something new, and it took me going to an event where they paid for me to go bouldering. I thought, oh, I'll book up and do the introduction. So just as human beings, we're often very nervous about doing new things. And then when you add in the spiritual element, the kind of the, you know, certain biases people may have or thoughts people may have, it's a hard thing to do to walk into church.
It is, and I think the biggest thing is, don't be afraid. There is a welcome, and I love that idea of having somebody on the door. I know when I went to St Peter's, going back over 10 years ago now, just before Alicia joined, and I knew she was going there because she had been my vicar previously, or curate previously. But going in, and there was David on the door. They said, "Hello, welcome," and it was like, okay, this is fantastic. Yeah, it is, and it's not to be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid of going in.
No, you know, have people with smiles on the door, and just set a real low base level and say, look, ask anything you like. So often in our sort of church, we have a traditional service at 9. We explain at the beginning what's going to happen. The 10:30 is much more chaotic with lots of kids. But often people worship with their hands in there. But I'm aware, if you're new to church, why on earth are you doing that? So I say, look, if you go to Pride Park, Derby Score, you put your arms in there. We're more excited about Jesus than we are about Derby Scoring. So you'll see people with their hands in the air. And they're like, oh, and people go, oh, okay, I still think it's weird, but I kind of get it. So we explain as we go.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's entirely up to you. I'm very quiet, peaceful. I don't put my arms in the air. I go and I sit and I contemplate.
Exactly,
and it's about whatever suits you. And of course, there's loads of different churches, as you say. The biggest thing is, please go.
It's 100%. And if you don't like the first one you go to, or it doesn't kind of meet your tradition, or then try another one, because there's dozens. And you might be a very quiet person, you might be a much louder person, you might like something very traditional, fantastic. You might like something very modern, fantastic. But there's loads of options.
There are. and it's great, you know, when you see the kids at the family service. It's always a bit of chaotic, but it's just fantastic. And my granddaughter will run around with the flags and everything. It's just brilliant. Thank you so much. I can't believe it. I don't know what the time is actually, but